Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Observable Flutter. My name is Craig Labenz, and I'm your host. And today I am joined by two folks from a pillar in the Flutter community. You might know them. You might have heard of VGV, employing many of the world's best Flutter developers, cranking out many of the world's most impressive Flutter apps for clients, demos for the Flutter team itself. Maybe I'll let these two guys sing their own praises a little bit, but I am excited to learn from them today about this toolkit that they've been working on. So before we get too far into it, do remember, folks, that this is the Flutter community and we want to be absolutely lovely with each other. All right, so today's guests are Oscar Martin and Dominik Simonik, and I've met them at various events over the years, but this will be my first time getting to host an Observable Flutter with them, so I'm very excited. So Oscar and Dominik, welcome to Observable Flutter. Would you like to say a few words to introduce yourselves?
Hello, everyone. First, thank you so much, Craig, for this. It's also first time on Observable, so yeah, really looking forward for it. My name Oscar Martin. I've been at VGV for like 5 years already. I'm currently director of platform, taking care of all our tooling, good practices, and things like that internally. I'm also Google Developer Expert for Flutter and Dart. Mostly my career has been around like mobile development, also cross-platform and things like that. So yeah, that's me, Dominik.
Yeah, hey, I'm Dominik. I've been in the VGV for 3 years almost, and I'm technology delivery lead. And in the mobile ecosystem, I'm around 10 years. Been also Flutter GD and Firebase GD for a while. So happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining me. So Jorge, your teammate, emailed me a few weeks ago and said, hey, we've been working on this thing, Project Wingspan. And I am, of course, personally quite a fan of the board game Wingspan, so I was immediately interested. And pitched this episode of Observable Flutter, said that you two would be the ones to host it. And now here we are. But that is nearly the extent of my knowledge of Project Wingspan. And I also gather that there's actually two things you want to talk about today. So would you like to kind of set those up for folks?
Yeah, I can start. So basically, just in case like you don't know BGB. So at BGB, Craig, thank you for the intro. I think you did a very nice intro about BGB. But yeah, basically that's the result of like many things that we have been working with AI during these months. So as you know, AI, it's everywhere right now. So a lot of companies are experimenting, trying new things and things like that. So as part of that, like a few months ago, we decided, in case you know BGB or in case you don't know, like we always bet for open source. Like we have been having packages like in the Flutter ecosystem for like a really long time, like very good analysis, very good CLI and things like that. So we took the decision of like, okay, let's put some of our internal knowledge right now that we are having about AI on different plugins. We create 2 Cloud plugins so far. One is the Flutter plugin that we can deep dive later, and we can receive questions if anyone has in the chat. But anyway, we are gonna deep dive into that. So we have 2 separate things. We have the Flutter plugin that is self-explanatory, is specific for Flutter with our opinionate way. One of the things that BGB is famous at it is like we tend to be like very, very opinionate in regards of Flutter specifically. So yeah, it doesn't mean that it's good or bad. Any other approach is just like, okay, this is our way to build Flutter. And basically that plugin, it's kind of the conclusion. Like we have been building like good practices in public as well. Like we have a website called Very Good Engineering. So basically we transfer that knowledge from the Very Good Engineering to that particular plugin. Dominik will show you a little bit of that later in detail. But yeah, that's one of the plugins. And then we were like, okay, but we have other things that are not just Flutter, or we have processes that are not strictly coupled to Flutter. Like, for example, if we are brainstorming a new functionality, or if we are reviewing a new functionality and things like that, or we are building something, that's not exactly like, yeah, many times it's with Flutter, but it could be with web. You could review or build native code and things like that. So that's why we decided to decouple, and we split into Wingspan. So we have the Flutter plugin, very, very specific on Flutter, and we have Wingspan that is tech agnostic. We will see also in this, like all the different skills, hooks, NCP connections, and things like that we have on all of them. So that's a general introduction of the topics.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Dominik, do you have anything?
No. I just wanted to expand on a bit on the like why we did the tech agnostic is that, like, as a Flutter developers, we also touch like a lot of the technologies. So we know that sometimes we touch native, we sometimes touch other technologies than just what are around the Flutter. So we knew that we have some practices that we do in the software development that are not definitely tied to any technology. So that's why the split happened, that we have the Flutter plugin there that is like definitely focus our number one favorite technology, Flutter, and the second, like, how we do things, and that's the development plugin, and that's the Wingspan.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering about the technology agnostic part. Not only, I mean, the incentive from your end to create such a tool is pretty clear to me. Obviously, Flutter developers touch other things, and you might just not use Flutter for every single project. So like that just makes total sense to me. What I'm quite curious about with a technology agnostic thing is, like, what are in those skills? Maybe you're just teaching it super high level, like CS 101 kind of, decoupling is better than coupling kind, or like do dependency injection, like this code needs to be testable, like that kind of stuff is true everywhere. So I'll be curious to see kind of what things are in that technology agnostic plugin, Wingspan. But yeah, so anyway,
Dominik, do you want to start sharing the screen? Maybe the people with some visuals, but I can start from that. Yeah, basically, as we said, like, for example, I don't know, if you are a developer or an engineer and you are starting to work in a bug ticket or even a new functionality, maybe sometimes you don't have requirements clear or things like that, or even for a product manager. That's not Flutter. Of course, at the end, it could involve like Flutter. But many of these things, like brainstorming the functionality, preparing the functionality, splitting the functionality so that you can break out, okay, I have this idea. How do I split this in a way that my AI agent is not going to ship everything on one single functionality, but it's going to help me break out that. So that process that we have been doing naturally, and we had those practice at VGV. Now we try to we move those practices into plugins for AI as well. So that's the motivation, and of course they work together. Like, for example, if you have Wingspan and the Flutter plugin, if you have both installed, Wingspan is gonna, and you are in a Flutter project, Wingspan is gonna be smart enough that is gonna detect that you are in a Flutter project, and it is gonna pick up all these skills that you have on the Flutter plugin, basically.
Nice, great, yeah, cool. All right, so does it make sense to kind of peek into how this is stitched together, or like, what do you think is kind of the most valuable facet of this to look at for folks?
You want to go, Oscar?
Yeah, no, go, Dominik.
No, I want to expand on how it's this staged, because we actually been looking one thing, like how one thing that why we decided to split is that maybe we're gonna expand our portfolio of the plugins, and we have a thing in the Wingspan which is called like recommended plugins that are actually like recommendations. So, which is kind of like a list of the plugins that we would love to follow next to the like techno-agnostic practices. So if the person gonna trigger this techno-agnostic repo and do like building, brainstorming, or other skills, it's gonna like, hey, you are in a Flutter repo. We detected based on the file that you have there, like a pub spec, for example, in this case, and we have a plugin that if you install it, you're gonna expand on your practices locally and you expand your skills, and it's gonna work for you even better. That's kind of like how we stitch those together, and this is something that we want to later kind of expand if it's gonna make sense or for us or clients. So this is where I wanted to answer the questions how these are kind of stitched. It's just this kind of JSON where we referencing the other plugin, and the hook there is in a skill just detecting what's in the repo while it's created, and based on the repo it's gonna recommend the other plugin.
Okay, all right. So you mentioned that this is technology agnostic. So here we can see that it's going to detect Dart or Flutter packages based on a couple little indicators, but those seem to be the only kinds of projects that are detected here. Are there other detections somewhere else?
No, there are not. On this plugin, it's just this, because other stuff that are in this plugin is basically how the development workflow is going. Is the brainstorming part, is the building part, it's actually the planning part. Because one of the things that changed over the years, or especially like last years, because we know the AI stuff is changing quickly every day, is that we need to pass the information between the developers better, and this is one of the things that we did with the skills. Is we have the plan skill and brainstorming skill, so we can push our thoughts and our plans to the repo before we actually start working with it, so others can expand and work on the same feature, but they have already planned in the repo, and they can work in the same ecosystem and in the same repo, but still they are aware of what others are trying to build.
I see. Okay. All right. So there's this is technology agnostic insofar as there could be other tech stacks added here, right? Okay. But they're not yet, but they could be, and they wouldn't really conflict in any way.
Yeah, and it's not that the plugin is not working on the non-Flutter repos. I actually used it on a Astro repo and other repos, and it's like the brainstorming and planning is, as we said, like it's techno-agnostic, and the kind of process behind that is still working. It's just not gonna recommend you any other plugin, and you might find other plugins out there.
Exactly. And for example, our Flutter plugin, it has some good practices about architecture, for example, in Flutter, like how at VGV we do architecture. So for example, if you are using Wingspan, of course, during the planning, brainstorming and everything, it's going to try to follow that architecture. As Dominik said, like, for example, if you are doing a Astro project, for example, yeah, of course, like it doesn't have that reference because we didn't put any opinionate way on how to do an architecture in Astro because we don't have that plugin and everything. But yeah, it's gonna still the plan, brainstorming and everything. It's gonna be working. The only difference is like it just has the opinionate way on the how, but all the implementation details, good practices of Astro, for example, in this case, are not gonna be there. It's whatever the provider is going, the AI at that time will pick basically, or whatever you input. If you give more context, because maybe on your project you have particular context, maybe for example you have a Astro project and you have different architecture recommendations on your repository, so it's gonna follow those basically. It has like a escalation way to pick up whatever information can find basically. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. The general models obviously these days are basically just can write any code in any framework in any language, no matter how arcane it is. So it makes sense that the task is, of course, not to teach it how to write Swift or Astro or any of these other things or Flutter code, but the Flutter specific stuff that you have is just the VGV opinions, right? The VGV way, and that, of course, it would have no way of knowing on its own. Actually, you've all documented the VGV way enough that maybe it could know your opinions even without skills in there. But for the rest of us, we would have to supply that.
Yeah, no, I mean, probably it can do it. I mean, of course, if you ask in a generic AI session, of course you can get to it, but it was, in our experience, it was not consistent. So that's why, like, even if we had this very good engineering, for us it was better to have the in order, because I mean, at the end, Very Good Ventures is a consulting company, so we have different clients with different situations, different practices, and everything. But we tend to follow, as I said, like, I think architecture, everyone understands kind of the concept. So we tend to follow the same architecture when possible. So in order to have that, like, not hallucinate and try to make it a little bit more deterministic. We know that AI can't be deterministic, but we try to do it with the plugins, like, hey, this is our architecture, or this is our approach for testing, like, this is the way we test, like, we go for 100% code coverage, or this is the approach that we follow for state management. Like, all these, like, opinionate ways is what we put there in order to be a little bit to have less hallucinations and to have a little bit more control of the output.
So, yeah, makes sense.
And also, like, I would love to, like, expand also that since we are, like, kind of outputting the same things, it makes us easier to kind of, like, expand on that, on the different, like, parts of it, like, especially the Flutter skills, but other skills, like, if we know that the doc for the brainstorm or plan is still generated same way and kind of asking the same questions and our experience that we have from the past, we know that it's kind of put there. But if somebody does not have that skill internally, we know that the doc gonna be different, which is kind of breaking the flow of the development. And we kind of wanted to standardize it also internally, but we share that knowledge via this open source package. But it's kind of like how we love to do things. We like to do things, like, very standardized and very stable. So if I'm, for example, I don't know, Jorge or Oscar are going to share me one of their brainstorm doc, I know it's going to be, the questions there is going to be in the same way. The kind of, I know where I can find things there, and it makes, I don't want to say makes life easier, but you get me what I'm thinking there. It's just like
much easier. It's more. We tend to call it this in the past, like, I think, like, boring. Like, it's boring because it's all the time the same. But for us, boring, it's something positive, like boring code. Like, we have been talking about that for years. Actually, Jorge is he has, I think, some talks about that as well. So yeah, that's a good thing for us, like boring code. Like, you open a widget and it's always the same. So you don't need to, like, the structure and everything. So here with the plan and everything is the same. Something that we notice is, like, every time we were doing a brainstorming or planning, depends on whoever running, it was 1 page long, or it was 10 page long, or with 5 different sections, or with 2 sections. So it was not consistent, and we love consistency. Of course, I mean, at the end, there could be, like, some exceptions, but we tend to be consistent with the code and with the way we work. And yeah, that's one of the motivations for these generic or agnostic skills, basically.
Yeah, with teams, predictability and consistency is absolutely king. I remember some folks that I worked with on various teams years ago would say that you wanted to be able to open a file and, unless you looked at the Git history, not know who wrote it. So, an opinionated style guide, so that if I was the last one in a file versus somebody else, you couldn't tell a difference. And then, obviously, architecturally really just, yeah. I think calling code boring really nicely captures that goal of totally just, it's so predictable. It's so easy to understand. Like, yeah, tremendous upside there. We can watch TV after work to be unbored.
Yeah, totally.
And it's also like capturing some of the thoughts of the developers. I like here, I would love to expand a bit on the brainstorm, because I tend to, at the start of the AI, for example, just ask the agent, like, build this way. And it was actually like going in immediately to the planning, even harder, go into the building part. And it even didn't ask me like what I want to use, which, I don't know, libraries, what's my thoughts behind building that. And I think this is the important thing in this flow, is like I run the brainstorm and it's asking me good questions that I'm kind of answering myself, or I go to the team and, hey, this is I haven't thought of, like, what do you think I should like go with? And when somebody else is going to join the project, you can look into the brainstorm doc and see like thoughts behind the brainstorm, like, oh, I see why Oscar went this way, because this is making sense, this answer. So I in this like development lifecycle, it's kind of making sense, like this extra step before the plan, and that's kind of like a bit where the plugin differs from the other ones. And I like this brainstorm part a lot, because I tend to build more than I want. So brainstorming is kind of pushing me in the right direction.
It reminds you the old Yagni principle. You're not going to need it.
Yeah, exactly.
I would really love to see this stuff in action. I don't know if there's more stuff that you folks want to, the two of you want to talk about before we fire it up, but
yeah, maybe before Dominik, you can share also the Flutter plugin, so that because we have been talking about this, and just to basically to tell the people what we have there. So if you can put the if you can give an overview on, like, as I said, like, we have different skills, like we have been working with accessibility, testing, navigation, so many things that as I said, like, here some people might not agree with our practice. Like, for example, testing is one of the things, like, we are opinionate and we like mocktail, like we prefer mocktail. So that's an opinion an opinion from the VGV folks in our experience, so we tend to put it there. But yeah, maybe also as you said, like, our preferred state management tool is or package is blog. So we also have our opinionate way based on the blog documentation. So all these different things that you can imagine about Flutter are here, and if they are not here, feel free. I mean, also the good thing is, like, even if we put it there and it's our opinion, feel free to, I don't know, give feedback, or if there is something. I mean, it's open source, so that's the point why we do it open source as well. Like, we are always looking for people who wants to give their ideas and everything. So definitely, don't feel like, I mean, I know that sometimes, like, these kind of repositories feel a little bit intimidated to contribute or to give opinion, because, as I said, like, we are opinionate, but we are happy always to discuss and talk about those, basically.
Well, Randall thinks that you need to adopt Signals and Keisel. The Keisel, that's like brand new, right? The new routing library. It actually looks really nice.
Yeah, I didn't use it yet, so I need to.
I also have not used it, but I did read the README, and I thought that looks really nice.
That's where I also ended up.
Yeah.
But I want to try it. It looks cool. Definitely worth trying.
Yeah, especially with sealed classes and exhaustiveness matching everything. Yeah, sorry, Oscar.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention something, because we have been talking a lot about the skills and everything, but something that we do a lot is, like, with NCPs, for example, we have our CLI, our very good CLI, that it has commands, like, for example, to create a project. So one of the things that we also notice is, like, if you don't put that. There is not a consistent way. So again, we are coming to be boring, and the consistency on like how do we always create a project on the same way. So for that, we created a long time ago the CLI, and what we did is like inside of the CLI, we create an NCP. So then on this plugin, it's already like connected with that NCP. So we know that every time we are gonna create a project, a Flutter project, it's gonna pick up that NCP basically. And that's also one thing that we connect all the pieces in our tooling, like not just AI itself, but it's also like a CLI that is like predictable. It's gonna 100% of the time generate the same template, the same package on the same way, basically.
Yeah, on the Flutter plugin, it's especially visible that we try to kind of achieve a bit more deterministic way of things that are going with the agents. Same goes like next to this CLI MCP is like each thing, each of the edit of the files in a Dart, immediately there is a hook that runs the Dart analysis and tells like agent like, hey, there is still static analysis stuff that you left after your changes, fix it, because we don't want to leave those behind. So we kind of like added stuff that we believe that are very deterministic, the CLI, the Dart CLI, the Flutter CLI, we added like kind of close into the skills. So we know that there is something behind that is gonna create stuff inside the project the way we are kind of used to before this. I'll have to go.
Yeah, well, AI is leaving behind static analysis errors or linting errors generally. That is, I think we've all we've all seen.
Yeah, and even if you put it, I don't know others, but at least in our experience, that's why we put it with that way. Is like even if you put it on the rules, like typical rule, like analyzer need to be with 0 errors. Like in our experience, like it was not working that way. So that's way that way with the different hooks and everything. Yeah, we put a little bit of predictability also on that, and we make sure that it's gonna run always. So
it reminds me of that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean where the female lead tells the main pirate like, "Oh, parlay, we have to parlay," and he's like, the pirates code, it's really more like guidelines," and that's kind of how the LLM responds, I think, to some of those rules files. It's like, I'll take it under advisement.
Yep. Yeah. It's like I sometimes feel with the LLMs, it's crazy powerful and crazy knowledge is behind it, but it acts very weirdly like an unexperienced engineer. And it's like this skills kind of helps this flow and also the agents MD file and other stuff. But I kind of feel like there is a amount of knowledge that I probably don't even have myself in. But it does not know how to use them correctly sometimes, and it's good to kind of guide the agent correct way with the skills and with the deterministic stuff that we put in.
Yeah. All right. Is it time to show installation, usage? I'd love to kind of work through some of those commands that you had in Wingspan, the brainstorm plan.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd love to see that in action.
Sure.
Dominik.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen.
All right, so while you're doing that, Randall had a question about specifically that brainstorm skill that we're maybe about to see in just a second. How does /brainstorm differ from /grill me in anti-gravity? And I have to confess, I don't actually know what grill me in anti-gravity is.
Saw that in
So if
action.
nobody knows the answer, it's okay.
Yeah, and then to be honest, I mean, I know the skill, but I don't in details. Like I will lie. Like I don't know like 100% like how differ basically.
I see.
Sorry, random.
I think one of the stuff that Brainstorm might differ from the Grill Me is that Brainstorm actually outputs the Brainstorm doc. I can actually show. Yeah, this is the actually Brainstorm doc. So this is the Brainstorm doc that we kind of. I'm gonna explain later what's the demo about. But one of the things that Brainstorm output is the doc, and I think Grill Me actually does not do that, or maybe it does, but we have our already like template for the Brainstorm, and that's kind of what we explained, that we know how the Brainstorm doc looks like, and we can after it follow on the other skills with the plan and build, like, hey, we know that we have the Brainstorm, it's already by the template, looks like this, so plan can follow and knows where to look in certain stuff. So I think maybe there is a difference.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like, basically, I mean, we understand many of these skills probably you are gonna find not just in anti-gravity. You will see in the community like other skills. I mean, I think something that at least we tend to do with this plugin is like we don't see those skills as isolate skills. Like, at least for the main ones that we have here, everything is like a phase. So basically, you start with the brainstorming, then you move to the planning, then you move to the build, then you move to the review. Like, it's all these different phases that all the skills are connected, so that I mean, of course, you can run them separately and everything, but they are gonna ask you, for example, actually, if you run a plan, it's gonna ask you if you have already a brainstorm document, or if you want to skip that phase. So it's gonna try always to kind of force you to follow like some steps, because basically, then is, I think Dominik mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. I mean, we usually go with AI like, oh, let's build this whole application in one single prompt. And yeah, I mean, of course, you can do that if you are doing an experiment or anything like that. But if you really want to build software, if you really want to build software that, exactly that way, in our experience, maybe, I don't know, maybe others has a different experience, but in our experience, don't work yet. Like, so that's why we prefer to, like, okay, it's not that it's gonna slow you down, like, that's not the point, but it's basically, it keep you in control of what you are building. Basically, it doesn't hallucinate anything. Like, I don't know what Dominik said before, like, if for whatever reason you don't know exactly which library to use for a particular functionality, it's gonna ask you for that library. It's not gonna pick, probably it's gonna give you suggestions, but yeah, these kind of things is the whole flow connecting and how they compare to other skills or other things that we use out there, and then Dominik, demo time, basically.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of chose like the app gonna be very good taxi, kind of Flutter taxi app, because I felt like this is the one of the apps that it can be like very expanded, like a search and stuff like that. So it's not like super nice features, because it's like here it's not like super advanced, but like I want, like, pretty much I pre-run some of the skills, because I know that it would take some time on this, and I didn't want to, but we can, like, if there is going to be time, we can run some of the skills. But I can go and over some of the skills that we have there and how does those work.
So one question that I have right now is just, I think I know what the document on the right is, which is the output of this brainstorming session, but what is the document on the left?
That's actually my command line.
Actually, Dominik, can you do a little bit of zoom on the command line? I think the document, it's the command. Yeah, the document is fine, but meanwhile, there is a question on the chat that I would like to answer. Is the last one about it's only for Claude? At the moment, yes. I mean, the reason is simple. Like, most of our experience right now at the moment with the different clients has been with Claude. So that's why we went for that. Hopefully, we will have more providers. That's really gonna depend on like how we will have our hands-on experience on the different providers, there are actually even issues on both repositories about adopting. So yeah, hopefully we will have more. Like, we can't make promises, but yeah, that's and most of the things are like very, very equivalent. Like, but still we know that in the whole AI depends on the provider. There are some conventions and everything. But yeah, at the moment, fully supported for Cloud, basically.
Is there something that prevents a person from using it with a different LLM? Is it actually, tied to any cloud-specific APIs or implementations or anything? Like, what if I just drop this into, switch my connected model to ChatGPT? Like, is it going to fall apart?
There are some cloud specifics. I think the hooks and stuff, there are some differentiators between the other agents type, like anti-gravity and others. So this is why we don't have it there yet, because since most of their clients are on the cloud, we knew the cloud way of doing these things, but there would be some tweaks on the plugins that would allow it also to be used on the other agents.
I see.
I don't think it's like it would not be completely right. Definitely, I think the skills and the references there are in the skills. Like, I think most of it is very same on every, but there are some differentiators between the agents. I think some front manner in the MD files is not allowed by others. So I think there are some differentiators, and this is why we don't have it yet. But I think this is something that we've been sometimes looking into, that we are love to expanding. And I would love to expand on what Oscar said. Like, this is open source. If you love to contribute, we are always open for contributions. So if you found the skills useful, we definitely welcome you with open hands. And if you want to contribute and use it on your agents. But yep. Should I go on a demo?
Yeah. So so I guess it looks like you're using is it VS Code or Claude Code? Okay. So yeah, take us, maybe even start with kind of just setup. Yeah, the whole tour.
Yeah, kind of the installation is very simple. I have already them pre-installed, so I will not use the command, but there is actually in the README, there are two commands that just need to paste in. There is a marketplace, which is kind of holding all of those plugins under one roof. And then you select which plugins you want to install. So there are, like, if I want to add this marketplace, I just drop it in the terminal or in the tool of choice. And then I will choose which plugin. If it's Wingspan, which is very similar. Is it Wingspan? It's not Wingspan. I actually put it close to Wingspan. So yeah. So it's very, very, very same. Or there is a one line install that is basically does the same outside of the running agent. It just adds the marketplace, which is, as I said, the roof above the roof above the plugins. And then you select which plugin you want to install. And after that, you can check if you have those installed via plugins. And I think, yeah, there is a cloud marketplace with the two installed plugins with the Wingspan and the VGV AI Flutter plugin. So this is the way how to install it. There is nothing else. The MCPs and hooks and skills will get pulled into your local cloud setup. And after that, you can immediately see all of the skills. In this example, nice. For example, I see the brainstorm. I see, I don't know, create project from the VGV AI Flutter plugin, etc., etc. So all those skills, they are there. I also like the / commands are not only way to trigger the plugins. There is a second way. If you prompt, usually if the if the agent looks into skills, if there is something there, tooling that's kind of match the prompt, and we'll launch the correct plugin for that. So this is kind of like set up for the installation of the plugins, and after it, you are free to go to run all the skills from both of the plugins. If you, I don't know, one of the immediate, if you want to start with a Flutter, is the create project. I don't know what would be the project that we want to demo.
Well, do you run that? I guess it makes sense to run that even before brainstorming, because you need to have some folder structure in which to put the brainstorming documents.
Yeah. So the create project actually use the I wanted to
entry point almost, yeah.
Yeah, kind of an entry point. So we have two skills related to that. We have a create tech agnostic skill on the Wingspan that kind of exactly does what you just told. Is like asking you, do you want to do Flutter and stuff like that, and what kind of project you want to start, and kind of ask you questions before going to the correct recommended plugin. And in the Flutter plugin, there is a create project skill that does the kind of follow-up and does the scaffolding of the Dart files and installing the PubSpec. And as Oscar mentioned, we have the VGV CLI that is plugged into this, and VGV CLI inside have a template. There are for the Flutter, Dart, Flame Game, Dart package, and so on. And if the kind of expectations from the prompt matching that, it will go and create choose the correct template and create project out of that. So cool. I can do, and I want to do Flutter or I don't know, Dart Flame Game. I think Eric would be happy. And Flame Game, I don't know. Can you guys tell me some game what we want to do?
What game do we want to play?
I think I'm gonna expand later on the taxi app, so it doesn't matter. It's just for the demo right now.
I see. Okay. Then how about a crossword puzzle?
Okay, crossword. So,
someone else said snake. That's probably a better, more fun idea. Because a crossword puzzle doesn't even need a game loop. Doesn't really need to be flame.
What we like to
snake.
So, and as you can see, there are a couple of steps before it kind of starts doing the things. Kind of what we've been used to putting into the CLI is what type of identifier your project wants to. So we can use the very good ventures, and then it expands. I don't want to, it's gonna scaffold the game, and calling immediately the VGV CLI, which kind of grabs the template out of the repo and puts the identifier and everything there. So the project's gonna set up by the prompt that is there. So yeah, we have the cross from flame scaffolded at the crossword. So if I'm going there,
I'd like to understand a little bit better. It had. You said it ran the VGV CLI, and that you said it was like adding the project name and whatnot, and the identifier. What exactly was going on at that step?
So VGV CLI.
Maybe open the repo of the CLI. So basically, the CLI, it has like certain parameters in order to be like as we said, like a Flutter application, a Flutter package. Like it has certain parameters. So basically, it's gonna ask you for some of these, like basically like the ID and things like that. So we connect the NCP like we have the NCP directly inside of the Very Good CLI, and then we connect it through the plugin so that we call and we use that basically. So those questions is like related to basically the parameters of the CLI, basically what we expose there.
Yep.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So kind of this is what this is one of the simplest skills that we have. So I pretty much did the same on the a very good taxi. So I asked, hey, can you pull the Flutter template, which is in the Flutter very good create Flutter package. It's Flutter app. Sorry. So it exactly pulled the template from the VGV CLI and asked me also the organization. So I told like, I want you a very good taxi. And after that, it was immediately created out of the template. That is the kind of the deterministic part, because we don't want to set up the project every time differently. We like to have the project same way every time. Like one of the things that is common on our packages is we have the very good analysis always there. So we know that the template already have the latest analysis there, and everything is cleaned by that. So this is kind of one of the examples of the triggering of the deterministic way in the skills, is that we are having tooling behind the skills that is kind of not allowing agent to hallucinate and do things own way, because sometimes agents tend to, install later analysis or later Flutter or later Dart.
When you say deterministic, do you mean there's literally just an old world script running that is like actually deterministic, not even just a well-guided agent? Okay, nice.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing. Like, you don't need to say every time you are creating a project, you don't need to say, "Oh, I want very good analysis in this project." Like, you don't need to say on the prompt and everything. You know that you are gonna run this command. It's a script, because basically the CLI is that, like, under the hood is a script that it has a template and it's gonna build your project based on that template, basically on that. So you don't need to specify these things like, I don't know, I want flavors. Like, for example, the CLI, you have flavors, like the development, production. Like, you don't need to specify all of this. You know that you run one command and 100% of the times it's going to act the same, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the benefit of like the connection.
Yep, exactly. And we also verified via the hooks that we have there that it was triggered by the VGV CLI. It was created by the VGV CLI and nothing else. Because this is kind of like, we trust that it's going to be, it's our opinionated things of doing things. So I created the project. It's actually here. I already expanded it. So if I go to, I want to demo the other skills that we have there. So for example, in this case, I was like, we can add the rights feature. So we want some rights repository, and that's going to return exactly the past rights, which are right now mocked. It's not the real data, but we want to use the APIs, the skills that we have in the plugin, and it immediately go and use the layered architecture, because we have the things in the skills, how we have our opinion way how we do things, and we like to agent to follow this. So if I open the layered architecture skill, it's kind of explaining like there are like 4 layers. We know that there's supposed to be like the repository layers, etc., etc. So, and for each, domain, there should be, again, one repository. So we like to agent follow this. Even it's small feature, we like to kind of guide him through the flow, like, hey, build this feature, but build this way how we like the things. So in this case, it goes and open the layered architecture and kind of started following the exact things that are there. Like, yeah, okay, I want the rights repository because it makes sense. I do rights qubit because, again, in the skills, there is a block. We do state management via block, etc., etc. Also mocktail. We talked about mocktail at the beginning. So I'm going to do tests, and I'm going to use the mocktail via that. After it started, it actually, again, went to the VGV CLI, and we have in the VGV CLI also the templates for the repository for the packages. So what it did, it actually created the Dart package with the correct names, etc., and kind of prepared the stuff the deterministic way and started filling the changes there after it's already kind of scaffolded there with the our already known way. There is kind of same for every package. As I said, one of the things can be the very good analysis that is there. We don't need to tell agents, hey, add very good analysis in every package, because he might actually insert the old one that was, I don't know, released 3 months ago. So we have the templates, and the agent's going to go to the VGV CLI, create the Dart package, and after that, it starts the coding and changes. They are already kind of specific to this feature because it's not going to be in a template. And of course, as we said, like another thing that we have in the skills is that after the changes, it gonna go and run the Dart analysis. So we know that after it created the repository, it already had some static analysis issues. So it went, found the 6 issues and fixed them. So we don't have to think like, yeah, it's coded and I have to run Dart analysis, for example, in a CI. Because one of the things, of course, we probably going to have the CI in a Git repository behind it that's going to run the Dart analysis. But why to wait to that? If we can leave it to the agent and do it before we actually push it to the repository, so it run the hooks, run the Dart analysis, and also went to other things like barrel. That's also important things. Like I think it's actually here. We one of the things that we do is we have a barrel files in the code. So it saw that in a skill and saw that, oh, there is a not barrel file that is exporting the model. So I'm going to update it and I'm going to do the barrel file and kind of finish the feature how we explained it in the skills. We have also it did the localizations for which we have also the skill. And kind of doing the things how we tend to do for the clients and how to do things there internally. So if I look into the actual code later, I'm kind of used to this. I kind of know how this code is layered down, and it's going to be pretty much on the every feature. So I'm not going to get lost. And yeah, it finished after the kind of brainstorming, and it also finished, of course, on the very good test, and etc. etc. Any questions to that? Because I can go on the demo.
Yeah, so I'm very eager to get to the demo. There are a couple questions in the chat. Randall has one. He says, Gemini reviewing the repo informs me that this framework uses multi-agents. How does it plan and do that?
I think it's almost perfect timing for this because, Dominik, you have something about the review, right? Because I think that's on the review is the perfect way to show about this.
Review. Yeah, the multi-agent is something that we have a lot. Is that if we let the agent kind of, especially on the review, if I will leave the agent reviewing multiple different kind of qualities, It can be, I don't know, test quality. It can be standards. It can be other stuff. It kind of starts to hallucinate, and it's good to kind of have a sub agents for that. So we have a, if I'm gonna go to the so if I'm gonna go to the review, it's kind of referencing the agents, which are kind of explaining how we do architecture, what matters for us in a test, what matters for us in terms of like code simplicity. And the agents are running in kind of separate tree. It's kind of like own context. It does not know about other agents, and it have own goals that it should look into. So it does not hallucinate the other agent. So if one agent's going to do the code simplicity and it's going to check if the code is very simple and if there's any Yagni violation, etc., the other one can check the tests and check the standards in the test, and it will not clash. And both of those kind of reporting the underlying, the top review skill. Once they finish, they will report, and the next step of that is, it will consolidate. It will check what each of these agents reported and which violation it found, and it will collect these findings, and it will create like a finalized review of the feature, or if I run it on the whole code base, it will generate me a review of the whole code base. And it's good to kind of think on the skills to we did the skills this way, because if we put everything in this skill, it would probably lose sense after the first like kind of goals. Like it would probably found only the test qualities or on the code simplicity, or it would start to kind of clash and hallucinate, and the quality kind of went down. So it's this is one of the reasons why you have the sub agents, because they kind of work separately from the main skill.
I see.
Yeah. And of course, after the review, we have the next step, which is the act. So it's gonna we can actually see that I was running it on the repo, and it found it was running as was said in the comments. It was running the 4 different agents, which each of them have own tools, and it was running like different times, totally separately. And it was waiting until those agents was finished. Once those were finished, it kind of consolidated in one review that is having all the findings from each of the agents. So I can kind of act on that and tell like, hey, yeah, okay, I think the important. I'm gonna skip those for now, and I'm gonna very focus on critical. In this case, there was no critical one, and for example, file them in the GitHub, because I think it would be good, because this review is not just for myself, but it can be also for reviewing others' code. Like if I'm doing some PR review, I'm gonna run this skill, and I'm gonna see like what are the findings. And I can ask an agent like, yeah, file these findings immediately into the comment sections in the PR, so there can be changes on top of the PR. Yeah. So this is it was kind of goal of the review, to always kind of have the act part of it. So all of the skills, if you're gonna review those, all of those skills have kind of like step by step. It always kind of grabs the context. It always gonna grab the information. Then it's kind of do some stuff I don't want to call it magic stuff, but it's going to do some stuff, and it's always going to do some act. And there is a standard way of writing skills there. We try to follow that, which tends to create in agents it's triggering in agents the same flow of doing things, like a to-do list and stuff like that.
I would like to add something into that. Like, I mean, what I'm gonna say, probably some people might have like a different opinion. Actually, Dominik and I, we have been talking about this lately. Is like, how far should we go in the skills into take a decision for us? Like, like for example, on this case that Dominik explained, like the part of the act is asking the user, like, do you want to fix one thing or the other? Because at least one thing that I personally I still like to be in control of like some of those decisions. And so we also not just for this skill in particular, but for many others, like for example, creating, we have different skills for creating PRs and things like that, or how do we commit, like certain things that I think, at least personally, I like to give the user, so in this case, the developer, the choice of like, okay, you have this path or you have the other. So we know that, some people might prefer to go in and if you tell that, and you have the rules and everything, it will respect that, of course. But yeah, that's one of the things that probably you will see a lot if you take a look to our repository, that there are many things in our skills, like asking, like for example, in the what we said before on the brainstorming, like, yeah, maybe you have an idea, but maybe your idea can be a little bit refined. So every time we do something in the skills, we try to ask for the input of the user, so that still the user is in control, basically. So yeah, I just wanted to, in case you see, because you will see like the ask user question a lot in the skills, and we saw it there in the act. So yeah, I just wanted to add some color on why. So
yeah, we kind of want, like, even that, of course, AI can generate stuff very fast, and it can like expand the repository very fast. We always want to have a user to be in control and kind of have a human in the loop. And it's kind of coming along with the brainstorm plan and build. So before, because if we don't do that and would not run the brainstorm and plan, and we would kind of leave the agent to do its own way, it would leave a lot of things behind. And for us matters still the experience of the developers. We know we have a good developers in the VGV, and their opinion is still like above these skills. This is something that just helps them to build stuff faster, or and kind of like cover more things. But the finalized kind of call is always on the developer, and it always is gonna be. And one of the things, like as I said, the commit is thing, like I have it, for example, differently. I don't mind agent to commit automatically, and it's all the skill actually saved it to my memory inside. That I like to do things this way, but I like to create PR out, like triggering myself. The committing is okay for me. You can commit. I still like to see that you do the committing correct way, but I don't mind you do the automatic committing. But some of the developers, for example, have to be like to be controlling on the committing, but the create PR parts, they can leave it for the agent. So even there is a standard way of things, in certain skills there are differentiators where we can ask the specific user that is running with the skills, like, hey, do you like things to do this way? If yes, we're gonna save it in our memory, and next time you're gonna run the skill, we're gonna remember.
So this all sounds pretty exciting, and I increasingly want to see it in action.
Okay.
So we've got about 25 minutes left, and I'd love to even start at the brainstorming phase.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'm not proposing something too far afield from what you were already planning, but
Alright.
I'd really love to see kind of even just talking about. I'd love to see what questions it comes up with, and I want to see it.
Do you have a feature in mind that you would like to brainstorm on?
Well, someone proposed Snake earlier, and
I'm gonna
games.
run the brainstorm on top of the Very Good Taxi app. So
Okay.
do you have any particular feature that you would love to add?
Oh, I see.
I was thinking, for
Well-
example, the settings. We can do settings.
Yeah, we can do settings, something like that.
What all is in the app right now? Can we kind of get doesn't look like it's a ton, but can we get a tour?
Yeah, it's not much. It's very much just a list of rights with the details. It's not much. It's just like super small app for the demo purposes. I even don't have it in a Git pushed. It was just for demo purposes.
Okay, then I think settings does make sense because obviously we're not going to get into booking rides and any of the other experiences.
I need to probably increase, right?
Yeah, please, Dominik.
I don't know why it's not taking my commands. Increase. Yeah. So I'm gonna run the brainstorm on the settings, and let's see what's.
We've got some dog lovers in the chat. Let's make a feature to schedule a taxi for a dog, and then Randall says, and then schedule a dog for petting.
I have actually dog waiting in front of my doors.
Maybe one of the settings could be whether or not you travel with dogs and need to filter on rides that support dogs.
Well, all right.
Dogs.
Yeah, we can do it. I mean, the first thing it does, like for example, here is telling you, yes, settings, but that's to, instead of going directly on, okay, I know what could be settings, like now it's clear, but it was asking basically like, yeah, but what is settings? Settings is too abstract, basically, too vague. Yeah, exactly.
What was the exact feature of the dogs on the taxi app?
Yeah, so it depends if this is a rider or a driver, but if it's a driver, maybe do you allow dogs? And if it's a rider, do you like have a dog with you such that you need riders that only riders that allow, or drivers that allow dogs?
Yeah, I'm gonna traveling with that.
Perfect. Cats are great too.
We are opening a discussion in the comments right now.
Yeah, I love cats and dogs. My wife also loves cats and dogs, but is allergic to cats. And my dog does not like cats. So there are no cats in our house, but I miss cats. I like them all.
I tend to be a dog person. So yeah, it's exactly as the author said. It's especially like it told me, hey, this is very, very simple. So you need a brainstorm, and I'm gonna look into first the code base if there is something related to that, which I think there is not. I'm gonna put it on the auto mode, so it's I don't have to like allow every single things.
Is there a visual indicator here as I'm using this for, because all these AI tools, anti-gravity, the other one, they're like kind of showing you receipts. I think back to math class in high school where you don't just write down the answer, you show how you got there. So right, the AIs definitely do that. And that seems to be what's happening here. Are there visual indicators as I'm using this in the future, as I become a Wingspan enthusiast? When is the output it just thinking out loud versus when is it like, okay, now it's time to read this and respond?
There are certain tools in the ecosystem. One of them is the Ask User Question. It's the specific tool that it's kind of triggers this extra UI, and it's gonna ask me like questions that the skill generated. Like, do I want to, I don't know, have a pet-friendly vehicle, blah blah blah. But there are certain tools inside the ecosystem that I'm having in the skills. Like if you want to ask user a question or you want to specify, use this specific tool, and I can go to the brainstorm just to show you that. So I'm gonna find it, but it's not gonna be much easier. Yeah. So there are certain tools in the ecosystem that are triggering extra stuff in the agent's workflow. They are kind of shown to the user. One of them, and I think the one that we use the most, is the you ask user question that is exactly doing this. Like it's either can be yes or no, or I can actually select multiple questions and it's going to stop on that. It's going to wait until I answer. And once I'm going to answer, it's going to continue on the same skill.
Nice.
So it kind of stopped. It asked me think that it kind of from the intent it generated. So I think we are looking for the pet-friendly vehicle filter.
Yeah. Yep.
Looks like, yeah.
Also nice that all four of those suggestions were pretty reasonable. Things we could have been.
And I think it's kind of where the brainstorm kind of matters a lot. It's just like I'm gonna kind of think about it before I even start coding, because we know it's sometimes downside of the developers to code before planning. So
No, I've never done that. No.
But I think it's what we like to do in a VGV to kind of plan a lot, and it's kind of coming with this life cycle, and we pushed a lot on this and the skills. So I think we can do new vehicle. I think this one is very good. A large, no new screens. It's gonna be large lift. It's saying it's a large. I asked for a large feature. I'm not sure if it's gonna be fast. I would love to.
Well,
we can go with it.
So what I was imagining is that we would not just have this be like not the full dog riding feature settings, just indicate, do I have a dog? Do I allow dogs in my car? I mean, it could be as simple as a switch button, or maybe like then you pick like the max dog weight allowed, or how much does my dog weigh? I don't know that it has to be that huge if we stick with the settings part. Has it maybe lost track of that?
No. I cleared the, when I did the clear, it basically right now does not know that I wanted to build the settings. So it's kind of expanding on the traveling with the pets.
Yeah, probably you need to give this context now on the type something different.
Settings, yeah.
Exactly, like let's focus this session on settings, basically.
Okay, this makes sense to me now why it thought this was such a big feature, because obviously that would be a big feature.
Kind of, yeah.
But also, I mean, that would depend on like the whole rest of the app even existing. I mean, really traveling with pets is really just settings, you just either you pair a car that allows a dog with a rider that has a dog, and then the rest of the app is the same. So maybe it's like, I've noticed that your app doesn't have any code in it.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if you saw before, but actually the first thing it was doing is it was analyzing the code base. So there is an agent that was running, analyzing what is on the code already. So on this application, there is not even a booking flow. I'm 99% convinced that if you are telling that without already an existing booking flow, already an existing settings page, it will probably tell you like, okay, do you want to put this on the settings, or do you want to put it? Exactly. I think context here is everything, and since the existing code base lacks that context, I think that's why, basically.
So we can. It actually called what we wanted to do is the toggle, or we can select the pet type, and we can do the pet type, and we can save it in the local shared preferences. I think it's a good way to do it.
That's good for the demo,
Yep. And and it's gonna start the brainstorming what I answered, and we're actually gonna see the brainstorming doc in a minute. Yep, it's went like, oh, you have 4 approaches that you can do these things. Like, do you want to do settings repository? It actually said it's recommended because this is something that we have hardened in the skills, that we like to do things a certain way, and the settings repository actually would make sense in this case. So I'm definitely going with this, but it gives you kind of like other approaches. They are a bit smaller, and in some cases are, of course, faster. But I'm gonna do it with setting repository because this is the way we do things.
Yeah, certainly over time there will be more settings than just tell me about your doc.
Yeah, it's stunning that it's not Git repo because for demo purposes I wasn't doing I was having it just locally.
I do also like that it's giving you the token count.
Yeah,
that is really quite nice.
And we have the traveling with pets feature. So it's a settings feature that makes sense. Why it actually show the other ways of approaches that were considered. So, but we want to approach A because it's kind of match the code base, establish layer boundary, which is true. We like to do things this way. And this is kind of doc that we can share with the team, like, hey, I want to with other, like, what do you think? And I don't know, Oscar can, for example, tell me like, hey, I would go with actually B, not A. Why you chose this?
Yeah, and this is the typical thing that probably, I don't know, on a programming session you will do. You will tell with a colleague, but maybe you will not even write about it. So on this case, like for example, here you are brainstorming, you took a decision and you write it, so that maybe it's not gonna be even you who take this brainstorming session. Maybe it's gonna be a different colleague, and you give like as much context as possible in all the decisions, that not just the final solution and take this brainstorming and execute. It's more about like, okay, this is the why, all the alternatives that we consider, and so on, basically.
Yeah. And at the end of the brainstorm, it always, like, of course, goes like, hey, what do you want to do with this next? And maybe Oscar agreed with this, so I'm gonna go like, I want to plan this. How I'm gonna do these things. So one of the things that we recommend do is actually clearing the current context. And this is one of the reasons why we're also pushing the docs into the repository, is that we still would love to keep the context around, but not in the agent's memory, because as we know, if the agent's memory if the agent's context is raising, it tends to hallucinate and losing sense what it's doing. So we recommend like, hey, start with the fresh context. The important stuff is already layered down in the doc, and plan on that. So I'm gonna clear, and I'm gonna actually plan. And
finish.
No. Okay.
I was gonna say the markdown file that we have here, like whenever it needs this context again, obviously we can just include that as opposed to the whole conversation that produced it.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, is what Dominik has done right now. Like, he triggered the plan and referencing the document with the brainstorming, so that it has that context. And it's gonna load only the necessary things that on the brainstorming phase, consider, put it on the brainstorm doc, and that's it. So that it has like a little bit more of fresh context with only the necessary for planning, basically.
Yeah. And also, like, these phases, that does not have to be me. I can be the one that kind of did the brainstorm. Or it can be even the product person that kind of like answer these questions. Like, I know it's gonna be in the settings. I know it's gonna be there. and then the kind of brainstorm doc can be passed to other person in the team that's going to do the other parts of the workflow. And the context is going to be still there. Yeah, it's already going to the VGV AI Flutter plugin because it detected the Flutter repo, and it started layering down the shared preference. It's going to take some time. So if there is any question to this,
do you ever find that the other considered implementations confuse it when it reads the brainstorming doc? Because those are also just tokens describing concepts, but they're under this umbrella of like a NOT gate, that a human brain can keep track of very easily. But this is just a lot of tokens describing the wrong stuff. Do you ever see confusion from that?
I haven't seen that. It's very similar to kind of skills, how the skills are written. I'm just gonna, because I want to discontinue, so we want to have it in an up bar for sure. That's kind of usual thing.
Yeah, seems, yeah.
Yeah, it can be settings repository, sure. Material free, we like that. So I'm gonna pretty much I followed the A answers, but it's very similar to how the skills are. So usually, if you open the skills at the very bottom, it's kind of important guidelines. This one is very simple, but right now I'm not sure which one is the review. So we're always leaving some kind of notes to the agents. What matters for us to kind of not leave behind or not to be hallucinated with. Even that in a brainstorm doc, there are other plans. It can be useful info for the other developers when they kind of be questioning why I chose this way. But we left the note that we want to go with the approach. And I haven't seen the agent kind of be hallucinated by the other approaches, because the next step of the brainstorming is not what we are building on. What we are building on is actually the plan. So before we actually start building the feature, we do the planning that is going to go with the A.
Yeah, I see.
And not,
I see. Right.
That's not going to leave behind. It's going to leave behind the B and C.
Yeah, makes sense. So is it working on the plan right now? Is that what's happening?
Exactly. It's kind of reading the what can be the user flow. It's reading the other stuff in the repository that is going to be important for this, and it's creating the plan. It's also creating the plan to be kind of if there is this this stuff is too big to be a one build session. So do you want to split it into multiple plans? What's the kind of goal of this plan? One of the things that we added lately also is the kind of goal success criteria. Is like, if I'm gonna finish this feature, what's the actually success of the feature? Is it can be I can run the app, I can run the test, or it can be even a human checkable criteria, like if human gonna go and open the app, it sees the feature and it works, and it's gonna answer.
Get in a car with my dog. That's how I'm gonna test it.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think it's actually almost finished the plan. So it's faster than I expected.
How often does the planning phase also come back to you with questions? Or does it try to get everything sorted out at brainstorming?
It very depends on the brainstorm and depends on the feature. Sometimes the feature is very straightforward and it's not gonna it's gonna ask me like one question or no questions at all. And so I saw the planning when I kind of have had a very abstract feature, I would say. it asked me a very large amount of questions before it actually went and later down the plan. So I don't think it's not just like one.
Yeah, the thing is, like, on the brainstorming, you focus on the what, like what are you gonna be building, basically, so that at least that question should be kind of resolved during the brainstorm phase. Then the plan, of course, in the how. But one of the things we mentioned before, since there are many things that we already have in the knowledge because it's connected to the Flutter plugin. So, for example, architecture, it doesn't need to ask. In the brainstorming, it just asks to confirm, but then it doesn't need to ask every single detail of like how do we build the architecture, because it already knows how we like it, let's say. So yeah, that's one of the things, like basically first focus on the what, then on the how, but with little details. If I don't know, if we have not considered something on the brainstorm, or maybe you didn't even have a brainstorm, because our recommendation is like you do everything, but you can start a plan without a brainstorm. It's gonna ask you for it, but you can still start, basically.
Exactly. So actually laid down the plan. As I went through, it kind of follows what we answered. It's like, yeah, we want your settings repository. It kind of looks like this, and it kind of like goes with all the things that we answer in the questions, but in a very more structured way, and kind of proposed solution way. So I can pass it to, I don't know, Oscar, and he can start building on the solution. And if I'm gonna go, what?
I said, yeah, Oscar, get going.
I will take it.
Nice. And it also like gave me the success criteria. So and that's what you're gonna be like. If I'm gonna open it and sees the stuff that it's gonna persist, this is something that I can, for example, give to the QA, or I can QA it myself and see like, yeah, this is the goal of this. It was the goal of this plan, and it makes sense to try it before I'm actually either merging it or if there is different flow. So I know, but there is also like verification commands. Like, of course, I want to have a test and analyze, is everything of this gonna pass before I'm gonna finish it. So yeah, they finished the plan. What it does at the end is kind of launches the same agents that are in the review, and it reviews finally the plan if it still follows the same architecture stuff and the same simplicity. And if it would not, it would kind of raise the question like, hey, I think it's still in the review, it would be caught. So please, can you do it this way? But I'm gonna stop the agent for now. I'm gonna go immediately I'm gonna trust that the plan is correct, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna build.
All right.
So I think 20. Yeah, this is. I think it was this. Yeah. So I want to build this.
So it was, what was it just doing that you stopped? Because the plan, what was it doing?
Yeah, it was the last kind of review
of its own plan. Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, basically it's like kind of a rare review of the plan, just making sure like it follow all the different steps. So yeah, it's like a final check, basically.
Yeah, this is something that we've been talking with the Oscar, that it's gonna ask me if I want to commit or not. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna commit myself because there is no git, and start building.
Let's go.
And hopefully it's gonna it's gonna do. It's hopefully there is no live demo issue. Live demos are sometimes tricky.
Oh, yes, they are.
So it's actually parsed already the file that I put in, and it started doing the things that are explained in the plan. It's the repository, the settings repository that is going to be, I think this settings repository, and stuff like that. And I interrupted it. Oh, damn. I interrupted it.
We want code.
My bad.
We want code.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're trying to
while it's running, I can open the one of the features that I was building. I think it's that's the plan. That's the I was building like a detail screen. So this is the I was kind of like, if I'm gonna open it, I have the details in much structured way. I had the plan for that. I kind of followed the same flow. So I prepared, and it was like, if I'm gonna tap on the tile, and what I'm gonna use is the what formats, and it asked me a couple of questions, and it's gonna launch via push road and stuff like that. And I pretty much finished the plan with the details, and I ran it on a build, and it finished the features the same way how it's doing right now in the, I forget which tab it was actually. Right now.
Too many tabs.
Too many tabs. Yeah, this one. So start building. Yeah, it was just because it's not
waiting.
Because it's not typical that I don't have the Git repository. So it's just like, hey, are you okay with that it's not Git and it's going to be just local? And like, yeah, it's for the demo. And yeah, it's kind of finished the stuff. Yeah.
Dominik, can you zoom this part so that we can see a little bit of like the intermediate steps of the building?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why it's not increased on every tab.
By the way, I don't know what app you're using, but the fact that you have to type a command to increase the font size instead of just clicking Command plus.
The plus button does not work for me. That's the thing. So
like on your keyboard or with this app?
Yeah, I don't know what's happening, but I tried the Command plus. It was not doing anything. So I don't know. That's why I'm doing this.
It works for me.
Okay.
It works.
It's just a classic ghosty terminal, so it should normally work. And it's actually, I think it's actually in the recommendations. No, it's not working. Anything increased? Yeah, I think it's normally there, but for some reason it does not work for me locally. So I think it was now I lost in all the tabs. Yeah. So it's layered down it's layered down the enum for the dog, cat, and other. If somebody wants to, I don't know, trail with turtles and etc. Why it's layered down all the models and stuff like that. We have the hooks, so it's always verifying that it's kind of not leaving things behind. And kind of finishes the feature. I have it running on the auto mode, so it's kind of not asking me for any like, do I want to do this edit or do I want to do this edit? I'm getting it behind running, and at the end, it's gonna end up on the build feature, which I think I closed. No, I didn't. So at the end, it's gonna kind of give me report what it did while it was building. So it kind of said me like there is a kind of green gate at the end. Like I run the analysis, I run the format. I know there are 23 tests, and it has 100% coverage on the new page that I built. So it kind of verified the code with the things that are in the skills explained, and it kind of gives me a report what are the new features. Like there is a new write detail page. There is the I don't know, models. The pump up was updated, and kind of ends up on the like a build review, so I know what it was editing and what it kind of did while it was doing its things. So this is kind of larger feature. So sometimes these things takes time, but I think that it's doing pretty well. Yeah.
So it's still working. I'm just trying to like get used to looking at this AI and understand what I'm looking at. But also you've got multiple tabs open, so sometimes I'm like maybe trying to parse what I'm looking at, but we actually
this is the one that is building the feature.
This is the real one. Okay.
Yeah, this is the live one. But yeah, I mean, I think because if you see the time that it took for the other feature, I think it says 11 minutes, and this So probably it's this is the things with AI live demos, and that
right.
You need to be waiting. So that's why like we have the kind of the plan B with different features already built.
Yeah, since we kind of predefined with the plan and brainstorm all of the features and all of the files and all of the kind of requirements, it's gonna go very deep and it kind of does all of the things, because it's taking the plan as I don't want to call it to-do list, but it's kind of like all of this needs to be successful, and it's going to take time to kind of implement all of these and also kind of pass the Dart analysis and 100% coverage and kind of things that matter for us a lot. And also things like architecture, like of course it can do things very not very clean way, and it might be faster, but we know that we do things very very separated. So it needs to follow the same structure of the UI block and the repository. So it needs to create more files, but it's actually like much easier to follow up on top of that, because I saw like when there is less architecture in the apps, if it's not structured in the same way and it's kind of like very YOLO way coded, the agent's gonna lost its own sense. What are your standards? And the plan and brainstorm would very be questioning that. So it's good that it's kind of following the architecture and it's kind of tries to achieve the goal that we layered down in a very VGV opinionated way. But it takes time to be kind of successful in this.
You're mute, Craig. You are talking, Craig? Yeah, you're mute.
I don't remember clicking that button. At VGV, what's your breakdown these days on AI writing code, presumably with this tool largely, versus still using your own fingers and knuckles to type yourselves?
That's a very good question. I mean, to be honest, I think this is changing for everyone. Like, I think if we were having this conversation a year ago, maybe
So mostly typing it out.
Yeah. So definitely, I think still there need to be a human in the loop and some, let's say, our expertise on that. So that's definitely 100% that I mean, actually next week, I'm doing a talk on the FlutterCon about vibe coding with, so if you are in the FlutterCon USA, Craig,
I'm going to be there.
Cool. So don't miss that talk because it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be in collaboration with Divine, which is a project that we have a few months ago. And actually, it was that, like how to move from a vibe code application to a production-ready application. We know that is the kind of history that is more accessible, more easy for everyone to write code. That's a reality. But this doesn't mean that it's like building software and everything. We know
100%.
that there are certain things that are still. So yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, the reality is like, I think the other day I was watching a conference or something like that, and they were raising the hand like, who is writing still by hand code? And the same speaker did the question like last year, and the results are completely different. In just 1 year, like last year everyone, it was kind of half. This year it was like pretty much nobody was writing by
hands,
exactly. So
I would like to also add to this is that while this is building, like, because I'm not writing the code, I can like have another session in a different work tree. This is not launching different work tree, but I can brainstorm the other feature that is coming and do kind of like this multitasking way that was less possible without these AI feature, AI coding. So I'm kind of leaving the agent do its own things that I kind of prepared for him in the skills and in the plan. And then while it's doing these things, I can brainstorm on the feature that I have in the list and start like, yeah, I want this, and kind of like expand my things that I'm working on the same in the same time. To I don't know, like usually I do like 3 things, sometimes more when it's smaller, but it's kind of allowing to work on more things and building stuff faster way, which is in my opinion very exciting. But it's good to have a human in the loop and kind of these good practices. So if I'm gonna open the PR, I'm gonna not be terrified by the code it generated, or I'm gonna be trusting what it generated.
Yeah, and not just even the code. Like I think with all these hooks, skills, and everything, like the code. Yeah, we add as many things in order to be clean code and everything. But it's also about like, okay, is this what we really need to build? That has been always the case. Like it has always the question, especially us as a consultant, when a client asks like, do we need to build this? Okay, we need to do a lot of tough questions. So I think that is still the case today, like especially with AI, like still, in my opinion, there need to be a human in the loop, making sure like, okay, what we have been asked to build is what we are doing right now. We don't deviate for that. Like we control, it makes sense. Someone was saying in the chat about the design and all this kind of stuff that I think still, I'm not sure, I'm not gonna predict the future, or I'm not gonna try to predict the future, but for sure, at least today, still needed, or at least that's our experience. And yeah, if you want to hear more about that experience, go next week to FlutterCon. I was not expecting that promotion of the talk, but yeah.
Seize the opportunity for sure. Speaking of pubbing your own talks, Rody Davis, who's been on Observable Flutter a couple times, and folks here probably know him, and I gave a talk at Google I/O, and this was a big aspect of this idea that Randall just said about how you can explore possibilities much more cheaply, throw out failed experience, especially in like a game. This could be, you might have an idea for a feature, but you really kind of almost can't know whether or not it's fun to play until you play it. And then if it is fun to play, we can maybe take a step back and engineer it with much higher quality and kind of run it through this whole thing. But yeah, just vibe coding in general is like, maybe if it was like da-da-da-da-da, and then you play like, oh no, I hate this. You didn't just spend a weekend coding that.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like experimenting right now is much cheaper, let's say. Like you can do experiments much faster, and I think for everyone who loves applications and everything, that's why, in my opinion, it's an exciting time on history because of that. Like the amount of ideas that they are appearing right now and everything. I'm seeing like crazy ideas every day on social media or even internally at VGV that, yeah, 2 years ago, yeah,
Would've just
it
never
was
existed.
it was more expensive basically to prove those ideas and things like that. So definitely it's like, at least my message for whoever is scared about this is like, don't be scared. Actually the opposite, like we should be like really, like it's super exciting time to be a developer, engineer, product manager, like someone who likes to build in general. At least that's my, I feel positive, very positive about. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Claude
I'm
is still cooking on that feature, but
it actually finishing just the tests. It had troubles in the test, so I think the feature I already started building. So because I realized like the feature should be already there, but one of the success criteria is having running tests. So it kind of had the troubles there. It's working there, but I think the feature already going to be there. So I'm building. It's like there is kind of like loop in the skill, like do it until you kind of be successful on a green gate criteria. So if I'm gonna go in settings, yeah, it's there.
cool.
It's doing the things that we kind of asked. I think it's very simplified. We have the settings, and if I'm gonna open it, yeah, it's still there.
Nice. Can you hot restart?
Okay.
For the full test. Yeah.
It's still there.
Cool.
I don't remember actually which one you left it on. Was it on other?
Okay, I'm gonna do dog. I'll restart.
I thought it was on cat. Hey,
nice.
Look at
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Randall's bringing his ostrich. All right, so let's make sure we end on some links where people can check out Wingspan and the Flutter CLI. But other than that, I'll give you guys last word here.
Want to go first?
You want to? Yeah, I can go first. So yeah, I mean, again, the same that I start, like please, like it's open source. Like we take a lot of effort. I mean, being honest, like doing things in public, it's always a challenge, and we take this very seriously. So we take that it works and everything. It could be internal, like we could be using these tools internal. So we spend a lot of time to put that in public. So please, every feedback is welcome, because we know that especially with AI, like it could depends on how the people are using the tools and everything. So the best thing, if you want to try the plugins and give some feedback, create issues, like very, very welcome. So that's the main thing. And yeah, we will continue experimenting at VGV. Like, I mean, there are other topics that we are super excited about AI. So probably we will see each other, hopefully in the near future, about other topics. But yeah, Dominik, any final word?
There was a lot. I don't know how to expand on that. Now,
sorry.
Feel free to review everyone and use it. We always welcome the feedback. I actually asked Claude what can be my closing sentence, and I was like, vibe code smartly, and very opinionated way. And I think with Wingspan, it's kind of doing that. It's like you can generate code, but smarter way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I certainly agree that you've got to be opinionated. I mean, we already had to be opinionated before LLMs arrived, and now just urgency ever higher. But you know, when you've got a new hire, pre-LLMs, you got a new hire, you got to be opinionated. You got to show them like this is how we do it. You can't just write code however it occurs to you in the moment, because then we'll all hate to maintain this code base down the line. So that's just still true. It's like nothing's really changed.
Yep. All tests passed, by the way.
Nice.
Awesome.
All right, folks. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for joining. I'd been off for a little bit between some personal travel, work holidays, other events. I was at Config a couple weeks ago, gave a talk there that was a lot of fun. I'd never been to Config before. What a lovely event. Next week, I'm going to be at FlutterCon, as Oscar was teasing. So next week, there will be no Observable Flutter. And then I don't recall what is on my calendar for the week after that. So we'll have to wait and see. But I look forward to continuing to sneak Observable Flutter streams in between the many, many things filling up my summer schedule this year. I'm truly all over the place, but I'll always be back here when I'm actually in California on a Thursday morning. So Oscar and Dominik, thanks so much for joining, and everybody, I'll see you in the future. And until then, happy fluttering.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.